What's up, y'all? Just Larry here, and we're here for another episode of the podcast. I'm here with my friend Jake. Jake's actually a savage sales pro. He's going to tell you a little bit about his story, but one of the main reasons, Jake, that I wanted to have you on here, man, was because we actually spoke for the first time. We had a little virtual coffee chat last summer. We stayed in touch. I really loved following along in your journey. And I know a lot has changed since then. So I wanted this opportunity for one, who are you? What's your story? And what are you kind of focused on right now, my friend?
Yeah, who am I? What am I focused on? Story, real quick. Let's make it quick. Bullet points, dude. I'm Jake JB. Been a sales guy for 9, 10 years now. Started in startups and venture space, then went into corporate. And my last corporate gig was working for a advertising agency out of New York, right in your backyard
Wow.
on Madison Avenue. That was fun, but I hated it. I was 25 pounds heavier. I'm an athlete. I wasn't getting better at my skills. I wasn't fulfilled. And my mom could brag about my job, but I couldn't. And so I made the jump into high ticket 2 years ago or so. I was familiar with the space a little bit because in
Yeah.
2020 and during COVID, I think a lot of us started up some side hustles. I was running like a content agency for startups, and it was
Yeah.
going well, but I kept getting into that fulfillment, lead gen, sales trap. I could get myself out of that trap when my clients would churn with sales. And I was like, I actually like this more. I wonder if there's a way to just do sales. And I think that Google search led me to Dylan Vergara, serial sales, and that's how I got into space. Right now, focused on building the business with Dylan at Serial Agency. We're laser focused on kind of doing done for you white label sales teams.
Epic.
And on the personal front, man, just golfing as much as I can. And
Yeah. I know you're a big golf guy, man. That's
yeah,
awesome. That's awesome.
yeah, that's the
Okay.
bullet point rundown, man.
Cool. Thank you for that. I love that, man. That was it's always fun getting people to do like their elevator pitch on your personal life, right? And your story. So let's talk first about before you got in remote, right? So you're Mad Men style, like advertising, Madison Ave, like walk me through what was not working there? Like what didn't you like about it and what kind of inspired you to get into the remote sales world?
Good question. The things I liked about it to kind of start there
Yeah.
was it was kind of what I wanted. Was a high prestige job. I think as a natural athlete, I was motivated by achievement.
Yes.
And then, I kind of just ran the length of that rope and got to the end of it and realized that this meant nothing to me.
Mm.
I love the people I work with, but the work I was doing I wasn't proud of. It actually wasn't anything related to sales, which I've always really liked. Um, I was just kind of a project manager, and it just wasn't for me. On
Mm.
top of that, I had been growing frustrated with the things that come with corporate sales, which is like the meaningless meetings, the lack of clarity,
Yeah.
the top-down management structure and the top-down implementation structure, where it was like the core team would have something going on, and it would be working, and we'd be getting a little foothold, grasp on what was actually working, and then from the top we'd get an order that like we're going to do something different. It's like why? Because this weird reason. And so that lack of control that has always kind of driven me toward entrepreneurship, I was just kind of getting to that point where I was like, I want more control over my career, over my earnings, over my time, over where I work and when I work. Um, and so those questions kind of narrowed me into remote sales. And then from there, it was like, do I want to go back into a startup or a corporate world job, remote? And I didn't want to. I wanted to see what it was like, kind of being a low risk entrepreneur, and that was high ticket.
Dang. Okay, man.
Yeah.
I relate a lot to your story because I remember, and I don't think there's anything wrong with a 9 to 5 or a more corporate setting. I think it's more so like, are you the type of person that aligns with that model?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
what back in the day, back in our parents' age, right? It's like we had one model. It's like you go and work for the corporation,
Yeah.
right? And so people were kind of just like, all right, that's what I just do.
Right.
But with the power of the internet and this online world, you realize all these different models are actually starting to like shape up
Hmm.
and different people fit better for different models. So you found this remote world was more inspiring. You had more autonomy. You had more freedom. So
Yeah.
walk us through once you did make that transition, right? And you
Hmm.
started working in this remote world. What were some of the challenges that you first had that might have been different from kind of the corporate setting? And
Hmm.
how did you overcome that, my friend?
Yeah, the first two challenges were just kind of identifying where to find the best opportunities.
Yeah.
Because I followed the path that I tell a lot of the folks in our community and a lot of folks that will hit me up on Twitter or whatever in the DMs. I tried to lone wolf it.
Yeah.
So I followed the guru advice and I went on LinkedIn and I was cold DMing, IG influencers and coaches and consultants. I was familiar with that world. I had been one myself and I had like helped other coaches in my network kind of just do some random online stuff. And that big challenge was I just got myself into crappy opportunities and I
Hmm.
wasn't even building a network. And because of that, I wasn't building a skill set. So a buddy of mine was doing kind of had the same motivation as me. Wanted entrepreneurship, but wanted it in a less risky way where you didn't have to worry about revenue and lead generation and traffic and fulfillment. Like, how can we do this better? He's now crushing it, doing mortgages remote, and actually just wrote the loan for our home. So that worked out. We've known each other since we were
Let's
5 years
go.
old. He sent me a PDF of a guy in this space that and it was like this Google Doc breakdown of what remote high ticket sales is and how to actually break in. I followed every single step on that PDF, and that got me out of the lone wolf mentality and into at least meeting people, understanding like who actually can help me in this space. And then he had a community, and I joined it. And then I got on the phone and I said, "What do I do next?" He's like, "You should start a Twitter." And I was like, "Okay." I had one before when I was a college athlete. That was kind of not the
Yeah.
same audience, or like I wanted to start from scratch and kind of build something else. And a couple hundred followers later, great connections later, I just learned that you have to one just meet people and understand that like the less you ask of them and the more value that you give, and even just if you're a good dude, the more that you'll actually attract the right people in your space that can help you in a way that's meaningful.
100%, man. It's so funny, right? Because I find Twitter to be like the water cooler of the
Yeah,
online space,
yeah,
right? The water cooler or like the locker room if you're like a certain part of like Twitter,
yeah, yeah.
right?
It's part of that. It's part of
So
that.
I loved it because I built my personal brand first on like Facebook, right? So you kind of
Hmm.
realize a very similar thing, which is like, all right, I'm a sales pro in the online world. The resume is not a thing here. It's a really
Yeah.
about like your personal brand. You
Mhm.
started taking action, started posting. That's how we got connected on Twitter.
Yeah, I think
And what
so.
and what I really loved about our connection is you said it straight. It's like we were just there to connect. I didn't even know how I could help you. I didn't know if you could help me. It didn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
We were just like, hey, we just met each other. Let's have a virtual coffee chat. Let's stay in touch. And from there, it's like we had this connection, and I think that's why Twitter is kind of like this nice niche in the space. Because when I was building my Facebook profile, like it's around 5.2k followers now.
Mhm.
Every time you hop with someone on Facebook, it was not to connect. Y'all were trying to sell each other some shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even an element of that happens on like LinkedIn and all that stuff,
Hmm.
IG. I think Twitter has this like unique space where when people actually want to connect, they're actually cool people that you would meet in person. They're
Yep.
actually there with no like sales like going out from the jump, right? It's really just you meet some smart people, you have some great conversations, and from there where it takes you, right?
Right. Big time. Big time. That's why I love Twitter. Even some of my mentors I've met on Twitter.
Yeah.
They're people that I admired for some reason, usually because they could communicate in a way that was resonant with me. That's the beautiful part about Twitter is you can't do it without being a good communicator. And I would reach out to them. Same thing. I'm like, hey, I want to steal your secrets. All I'm asking is for 15 minutes of your time. I don't have any other ask besides that. If you could be generous for 15 minutes, I'd greatly appreciate it. It'd have a big impact on me. If not, no worries. I'll keep
Yeah.
following along. And people that have helped me navigate my career, get me out of tough spots, give me great advice, avoid horrible opportunities. It's
Yeah.
not just the peers. That's where I met, my mentors too.
Yeah, man. And I think you have such a skill set that I think a lot of people in the remote or online sales world kind of neglect is you got really good at networking and getting yourself in the right virtual and in-person room. That's
Mm-hmm.
it, right? And so talk through a little bit about that, right? Like obviously you went through the journey of all right, corporate, remote sales, and then you got yourself an opportunity to work more with like Dylan in the serial sales community. Talk us through kind of whatever you can share, of course, but like how that started to get birth and put you to where you are now.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I can probably be as transparent as
Yeah, yeah.
possible. I hopped in the community. and I had basically going outbound, found an opportunity in my network to function as a sales manager within a private equity company.
Yeah.
This gentleman was, again, a guy I admired. I saw his stuff on LinkedIn. He posted about an opportunity in a company he was invested in. And I reached out and said, hey, I'm looking for, an opportunity to level up in my sales leadership. Here's my skill set. Here's my resume. It's on LinkedIn. You can see it. Would love a chat to see if there's a good fit. That led me into that opportunity, and I was managing sales for 2 or 3 different companies at once. And I was basically bringing that high ticket model to these remote businesses. And so there was a good fit there. Did that for about 6, 7, 8 months or so was the total journey. And I got to a point where things were going badly. I went to visit the companies in Austin and found out that one of the companies was running a Ponzi scheme.
Wow.
Not intentionally, right? It happens step by step. Good people can do bad things. But I found out and saw firsthand that the orders I was selling, they were tiny home investment properties. Orders I was selling, we were using that money to pay for past orders. So when it came time for the new orders, we had no cash.
Zip. Yeah, okay.
That company ended up going into legal trouble, but I was in Austin with a rental car. And I knew Dylan was in Austin. I was in his community. We chatted about a few things here and there. And we got a good vibe check, right? Didn't ask for anything in return. I was already a member of his community, so he asked me of something, and I accepted. And I said, hey, I'm about an hour away. Can we meet for dinner tonight? And then we got a hold of each other, and that was good. I told him about my situation. Again, didn't ask anything at that point. I hopped back into community, which is the power of these remote communities. Again, paid private. Like, this is the way you got to do it. And I said, hey, guys, I just resigned from my role on Sunday. I need income now. I'm in a spot where it was going really well. I put all my chips all in. I didn't win that hand. It went poorly. I'm taking an ego check. I just need income. Anybody have a closer role available? I was able to get hired in 3 days, and then went on to have really great 10K plus months, and then got out of that hole. And that was because of that power of the network.
Yep.
That went well. Again, I kept sharing my journey, kept documenting, sharing wins here and there in the community. And then there opened up a spot within the community to help Dylan scale out what he wanted to do. And I jumped at it, and I started taking calls to bring people in his community. I was a student. I had a corporate background, and we were getting a lot of people from corporate and tech coming into this world, which you know very well. Like, it's kind of, we're trending up toward that. Did that, proved my skill set. I think I was closing at like a 75, 80% clip. And he was like, all right. Like, firsthand, it was working out. And then from there, it just turned into from a kind of a relationship where I was closing for him into a friendship. And that friendship turned into me coming to him and saying, hey, I'm looking to really, really extend out my impact here and start to build these skills.
Wow.
Let me know if there's something available and something that you see. And he's like, you know what? I think there might be an opportunity with the agency. And that was back in April.
That's epic, bro. So wait, if I heard this right, the same week that you were in Austin for the past client and realized, all this shit just went to...
Yeah.
Was the same week that you got dinner with Dylan and we were like, hey, this is what happened. Like, kind of planting the seed.
Planting the seed for sure, but not intentionally.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the key. And it was more like I wanted to understand the greater game that was kind of going on.
Exactly, man.
And I was like, all right, I've found somewhat of a fit. Again, that grasp, that foothold that you get. It's like, okay, I got something here. What are you seeing? What's out there? What does it mean? I think I asked them questions like, how do you start your own high ticket offer? Like, how do you actually go about this? What are you seeing? What are other people seeing?
And that's the key, man, is your genuine curiosity. Just like any good sales pro has genuine curiosity. It was not to sell anything. It's not to pitch yourself. It's just you're coming in curious, and your curiosity led to doors. Yeah. Right? It led to doors. And so that's go ahead.
No, just to expand on that story too. I was like quite literally an hour and a half away. I basically, you get to a point when things happen like that. You've been in your career where you go, what are my resources? How much time do I have? What's the best use of that time? I had a rental car, and I had no obligations the next morning. I said, okay, Dylan, I'm on my way to Austin. Any chance you're free? I was already in the car, I think, at that point. I drove 90 minutes. got together with him for a couple hours, and I drove back. I think I got back like 2:33 a.m.
Dang.
And I was like, all right, I've at least taken action on things I can't control. I have no idea what's going to come of this, but at least I know that, okay, there's hope in this space. I don't need to go find another job in corporate. I can make this work. I just got to prove to myself and outwork my doubt that something's going to work out.
Exactly. Yeah, man. It's the power. It's the power of a community. It's the power of the network, right? I've discovered a lot of very similar things in my journey as well, which is people think that the remote sales world is just about being a really good sales pro, but it's like you could be the best sales pro in the world, but if no one knows who you are, you have low leverage, right? And so what happened to me is like similar to you. There's a couple pieces that really stood out to your story that kind of resonated with my story. Was number one, the act of humility. When something goes south, that you actually just humble yourself and you're like, okay, cool. I still got a lot to learn. Like I'm here to, I'm not ashamed. It's not guilt. There's nothing there. Like, let me go find something else. I think that's a big thing because oftentimes it's the other way. A lot of sales pros have big ego, and then it gets them from actually getting their goals quicker than they could have. And then number two, going back to understanding that your asset was that network and you could find that opportunity within like 3 days. I remember when I left I left an opportunity in 2020. It didn't go well, right? Similar offer didn't align. Within literally, I went back to my power broker. I went back to my connector. And within 2 days, he had an interview booked out with me for another offer. And I stayed on that offer for 2 years. And that's where I amassed the majority of my millions in high ticket sales. So it literally took one message, but I spent the year continuing to nurture that relationship, asking nothing for return, actually just really just building a relationship, which sounds so simple, but people can't do it for gosh sake.
Fundamentals. It's the fundamentals.
It's like, yeah, man, you're an athlete, the fundamentals. So they put you in a point where now you're obviously working with Dylan. Talk us through some of like the big wins, the achievements that you kind of been able to accomplish while you've been in this new role.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the big ones was internally was I actually figured out what it meant to be a contributor at the partner level of a partnership like this.
Yeah.
Which is an exercise of finding where you're valuable, finding where to spend your time. Because if you're a partner in an agency like this, you're not highly leveraging your time, and like you're wasting the agency's time, which is important. That exercise alone was a really big win for me. Tangibly, we've been able to onboard a few clients just because I've been able to take away time from Dylan and Cole, and we've also been able to bring in another one of our partners and leads in the agency, Rich, Close and Paid, right? And so we're just doing really high level work. I was able to put together probably the coolest case study of my life, which is we launched 2 offers from 0 to 400K.
That's right. Not once, but twice.
Twice, baby. And it felt good, right? I was like writing that and I was like, I would be proud of myself here.
Yeah.
That was another big win. And then, I'm actually practicing still, right? I'm launching offers, learning this process. Yes. And with that has come, the cool wins, which is like the income and like the multiple streams of income and what it feels like to be a partner and that's only paid on performance basically, which is, entrepreneurship. That's been a huge win for me. I kind of texted the guys, we're in this transition period where we got to a point where we couldn't take on more clients because we were just stuck in fulfillment. So we kind of slowed down to speed up. And in that process, I had kind of my low month where we were building a bunch of stuff. I was doing a ton of creative work. I wasn't on as many live sales calls. I was doing management stuff and not recruiting. And I messaged the guys. I was like, my August was my low month, but my low month used to be my high month in corporate. I was like, aha, okay. We're now in a point of leverage and I felt like completed and closed out that journey into this world.
Yes.
Where in a month where I was actually not doing the sales activity, I was doing the management and leadership activity, I made more because I was in the right vehicle. And I was like, aha, yes, cool, all right. All upside from here. My downside's my old upside, and it was fun.
Dude, what you said is it's the right vehicle, because I think that's the piece that a lot of people miss is oftentimes, right, if you're new to this online space, at least this is my experience, is you almost feel like you're just fumbling, and it's like this fantasy land that you've just been scammed into. It's like, oh my gosh, all these people talking about money. I can't even figure out how to make money. And then you finally get to that point where, oh, I'm in the right vehicle, I have stability, and the upside is endless.
Yeah.
And you said something that was so key, which your highest months in corporate became your lowest months here.
Yeah.
I remember when that moment happened for me, I was like, okay, this is just like video games now, bro. Like I'm having fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I've leveled up into an opportunity. Like my enemies I'm facing are even greater enemies. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know how this happened, but I'm glad I stuck with it. And to that point too, this was definitely the first thing I've probably stuck with the most.
Man.
I'm past that point of like, is this going to work? Now it's just like, how long can I sustain? And
Yeah.
It's a game of patience now, which is a fun point to be at.
And when you can play from that game of like long-term time horizon, it's like it almost becomes an entirely different game, because like you said, you go from survival to thriving, and then it almost becomes kind of like this creative art of sorts, right? You're just honing your craft, which is, if anyone is out there, if you're kind of in that place where you're struggling, like get through that struggling phase as quick as possible, because when you get to that next level where like Jake and I were kind of talking about, it's so fun, and every all the hours, all the bullshit that you went through becomes worth it, man. It becomes worth it.
Big time.
So that being said, I think I'm always curious on this, right? Building these sales teams, taking 2 teams from 0 to 400K, right? What is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned about building sales teams? So this might be more of like a sales manager or sales leadership perspective. Like, what is the biggest thing that you're learning from this process?
Good question. And to be clear, that was what our agency did. That wasn't even me managing.
Right.
But what I've learned kind of building out these teams is if you do the upfront work to find winners and to find people that are invested and that believe in the same things that you do, a lot of the other stuff kind of works itself out. Like specifically, we just launched this new offer with this company, and we're getting it off the ground. They're a successful business. They've been in business for 22 years, but they need to expand out, and they need to grow a remote sales team, and they need to kind of double the revenue. And so we did that in the first month, actually. So back to the wins, we basically matched their digital product revenue with high ticket revenue in the first 30 days, just figuring it out.
Boom.
We were able to do that because we had found somebody that could manage the whole front end of the sales process. He was more than a setter. He was like a strategist. How do we actually target the leads? What should I say? And he wasn't asking questions like, hey, tell me what to say. He was saying, I want to say this. Can I? I think we should do this. How long will that take? Do we have time? And so it just became a partnership in between he and I, where I'm still building out the closing process. I'm still, trying to find someone to take over at this point once we get to that good number. But we did the upfront work, and again, he was in our network. We know he does great work. I worked with him or kind of alongside him on another offer.
Yeah.
And he was doing that same thing, and I sensed he was taking initiative. And so the big lesson I learned was like, okay, just kind of keep those people around you and just know in your head and mark the winners. And when the time comes, just tell the winners kind of what the vision is, recruit them in a way that's meaningful and that works out for them. And then all the other stuff will take care of itself. I can't imagine how many hours and hours he saved me. Marco, if you're out there listening, dude, you're a stud.
Let's go, Marco, man. Dude, that is, it's so key, because I think I found a very similar lesson is like, at the end of the day, it's all about the talent that you're working
All
with,
that talent,
right?
yeah.
The extent and level that you will grow and scale as a team, it comes down to the level of your talent, right? So when you can find people who are actually good at not just taking orders and executing, but they can come in with ideas, they can come in with strategy. Yeah. That's the next step, right? And I think that was kind of like the question mark that I always had for years, or not years, but several months, where once I like hit my like pinnacle as a closer, I was like, what's next? Like like in the corporate world, it's like SER, AE, sales manager, then like director of sales, VP. So there's like a ladder that you climb. Right. In the remote world, you kind of craft your own path.
Totally.
Right. Yeah. And so this guy, Marco, he's like, maybe he didn't even see the opportunity. This was just his skill set. He was just good. Realize it's like, hey, I'm not just a setter. I'm not just confined by that. There's actually ability and opportunity for me to step in as a strategist, a bit of a leader here, right? So for you guys with Dylan and the team there, how do you guys think about leadership? How do you guys organize the team? Like, what is that composed of when we're not just talking about the sales machine, but the talent itself?
Yeah, good question. I think one of the things Cole talks about this is if you can find people that have or have done something entrepreneurial, that going through that trial and error and that process and arriving to where they are today is super useful.
Yeah.
And then if you can combine that, kind of that person that thinks about offers and thinks about angles, thinks about the things outside of what is my talk track and how do I objection handle, you can find somebody with a natural curiosity, and then you marry that with the right season of life, which is what Dylan talks about all the time. You find that person, and that is kind of where you would get your foothold in and be able to bring someone in. And then the opportunity, it doesn't matter what the opportunity is. If you find someone like that and you tell them, like, we're going to be doing a biz op for vending machines, he's like, yeah, of course, yeah, let's crush, And you just tell people, this is the level of ownership we expect. This is the level of hands off how we operate. If you're willing to work with us on this kind of stuff, then I think there's a fit for you here. And if it doesn't work, no problem, no harm done. Like, we'll do everything that we can, and we know that you'll do everything you can to find a better opportunity. I think that's kind of why we brought Rich in too, was because it was like, Rich is just like that. It's like the level of ownership and accountability that he has in the right season of life to be able to scale out this kind of stuff is meaningful. And if we focus on that stuff, everything else kind of
I love that saying, the right season of life, because I think that is so important, right? Like, you can come across talent who is like an A player closer, for example, but there are times where it's just like, well, hey, I caught that person when they're just having a kid and they're actually trying to slow down, not speed up.
Yep.
And also the other way, which is like, you catch that kid that maybe he's not the top sales rep yet, but you can see that he's like, he's got the Heisman potential, right? Like, he's got that dog in him, as some people may say. And you invest in him at the right season where he hasn't had all the right opportunities, but you can sense the talent, and then he grows within the organization. So I love that saying, man. I use that outside of not just in sales, but I use that in my life as well. And speaking of like outside of sales, as we kind of like wrap up, right? Like, who is Jake, man? Like, what do you like doing outside of the sales game? What's kind of the hobbies, the passions? Like, who are you just as a human being, man?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's something that you don't really get very often in the online space, which is fun.
Right.
The business card speaks for itself, but man, outside of here, I've got my golf clubs here. I've got a golf hat on. That has basically fulfilled my athlete desire to kind of grind on something. There's a lot of similarities in between golf and sales, which is nice.
Yeah.
They kind of improve on each other. Outside of that, I'm getting married next summer. Just bought a house.
Woo! Congrats.
Growing up. Thank you. Thank you. Growing up in life, man. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, for better or for worse, but it's home for me. Big reader. Again, I talked to Jeff Lundin about this kind of stuff. I've got a bunch of books right here. He and I kind of connect on that personal development and reading fronts.
What's been your favorite book of yours, like the past year? Like, what's something that you've read that was like, oh my gosh, this is gold? Good
question. I finally read. I like Nassim Taleb, so I read Fooled by Randomness.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
I like finding. We've got a used bookstore here, and I like finding these old used books. There's also two books by a name everyone's probably heard, which is Anne Reed.
Yes.
Capitalism. This one is fun. This is a philosophy book disguised as a tribute to capitalism. It's super old, which is fun.
Is it older or newer than Atlas Shrugged? Did they do it before or after?
This is after. Yeah, there's there's excerpts from Atlas Shrugged. It was published in 1946 first.
Wow.
So like, there's some very prescient things in here that's meaningful, especially in online business. And then she has a great book on writing, which again is actually a book on communication disguised as a book on writing. She has this really good. I'll share this real quick with the audience, but there's basically this idea that she calls concretizing your ideas, like concretizing your ideas, which is like really meaningful in sales, where don't just rely on the talk track that you've been given in your script. Make it real, make it personal, like bring it to life in a conversation, and then have something concrete to point to. Someone that's really good at this, again, you're letting my passion go through, I think. Thank you for that. Someone who's really good at this, and I swear he's read this book, is Hormozy, where
Yes.
people will ask him, "What is honesty?" and he'll say, "Honesty is telling your mom she looks ugly." Like things like that, where it's like that's a concrete idea. What
Right.
does
Right.
what does hard work mean? Hard work meaning is just doing as much work until it gets done, no matter what the hour of the day, how you feel, and what you do. It's
Remember
like that kind of stuff. It's meaningful. Those two were probably the
Dude,
most impactful.
that is awesome. Awesome. I love that you didn't just pull up like I mean I love $100 million leads and offers, but you actually gave like good takes that most people probably have not heard of. I personally I love fiction.
Yeah,
Because it gives an insight into reality that I probably would not be able to find in nonfiction.
yeah.
Right.
I've got a good friend. I gotta give her a shout out to Ellen Fishbein. She's gonna be famous one day if she's not already.
Okay.
She is a writing coach down in Austin. I actually should reach out to her. But she, where am I going with this? What was the question?
Just about fiction and like the power behind
Fiction.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. She turned me on to a few fiction books, and she says like some of the best fiction is actually the best nonfiction.
Exactly. It's funny, right? Like a lot of people who've given me like compliments on like some of my branding and stuff like that. I told them like none of this came from a business realm. It all came from like fiction.
Yeah.
Like I grew up falling in love with like reading fiction, watching certain TV shows, movies, cinema, right? Japanese philosophy, things like that. And I was like, how do I integrate this into kind of like a passion and with what I'm doing with business? And I got all those ideas from fiction. And I think if more people, kind of like what you were saying here, are creating ideas outside of just like the Twitter and YouTube business space, they would actually have some more unique ideas, more messaging and branding that stands out than the other copy and paste that you see on ads. Because when you get out of the vacuum of like this online space, that's actually where the best ideas come from.
That's so true. What's something you read recently that kind of brought an insight that you could bring into your world?
Yeah, man. So I'm a little bit of a geek. All right. So I love reading fantasy. So I read this it's actually a light novel. So light novel is like kind of like a visual novel, but it's more based on like Japanese character arcs. So one of the things that I love over like the Eastern character arcs found in like manga and visual novels compared to like the Western is they're really good at painting the story of the protagonist. So in Western, it's actually really built more so on kind of like this episodic style of things. Okay. So it's like this happens, this happens. It's very like action based. This is very story and character driven based. So I get a lot of ideas on writing and kind of my personal brand and how I want to portray myself in like videos or content through reading like fantasy fiction or any sort of like manga, Eastern character story arc. Because if you look at the hero's journey, the people who've actually mastered that are actually the Japanese. Funny enough, they're really good at creating a strong, compelling hero's journey that has multiple years and layers that stack upon each series, as opposed to the Western, which is kind of like they have a hero's journey, but like it's one and done. Anakin Skywalker, right? 3 films. Luke Skywalker, 3 films, right? Where you have these type of visual novels and manga, it goes over like decades. Like I'm talking 30-year stories, man.
Oh, love it.
So they're really good at continuing to compile the story of the protagonist. Where if you really view our story and our personal brand, it's not oh, Jake went from like high ticket to now this thing. It's a compilation of years, of decades. So that's why I actually get inspiration from these stories as opposed to like Western.
Oh, how much more compelling is that than like, oh yeah, I read the brand story by a public speaker, and I followed the 10 best brand ideas on YouTube. Like,
Right.
that's where the edge is. Is not reading the nonfiction section or the business section of the bookstore.
Exactly, man.
It's the Japanese visual novels. That's fun, man. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. So that being said, man, I just want to thank you for, your time here. I think what I would love to end this podcast in is if you were to go back to your younger self, so you can choose any age, I'd actually love for you to share the age and then the piece of advice that you would share that person and why.
Tell me about the age. What's the age?
Yeah. So you can choose any specific age, whether it's you an 8 years old, 18 years old, or 20.
And when
Go
I got
back
that
to
advice?
Yeah, pick a younger self
Yeah.
And what is that advice that you would give your younger self?
Good question. I played college basketball at Davidson. My coach was a Hall of Famer named Bob McKillop. There was one summer where I was on campus, and I was taking classes to get ahead of credits, and I was also training and getting in shape, and I didn't really want to go home. It was fun to stay on campus. There was this class of just 2 people, and you'd show up once a week, you'd do kind of an exercise, you'd show up the next week. I skipped one of those classes for no good reason, probably just subconsciously to see if I could get away with it. He found out because the teacher told him, obviously, I was one of 2 students. I made up some crap reason that he knew was fake. And so at 19, he sat me down and said, this was not what you're supposed to do. And he said, you've talked to me about wanting to lead others. You cannot lead others until you lead yourself. And that's what I would probably tell my 10-year-old or 12-year-old self was that, hey, leadership is not about what you do in public or how you speak or how you look. It's how you lead yourself first. And that's what I would share with anybody is just learn to lead yourself, and then leading others just comes naturally.
Wow. Learn to lead yourself, and leading others comes natural. Jake, thank you again, my friend. And for anyone else who's watching this, go ahead and follow Jake. He's awesome. What's the best place for them to find you, Jake? What do you recommend?
Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Jake JB.
Okay.
On Instagram, I just started that up. Going to be posting a ton of business content, separating that from my personal.
Okay.
On there, I'm Jake Pastick, Pastick. Otherwise, Jake JB, all spelled out, on Twitter and YouTube.
Cool. Jake, again, enjoy your weekend, man. And thank you again for showing up in the